Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. I'm flying solo this week, talking about Welcome to Earth, the Silent Roar specifically, basically the first episode of this little Nat Geo miniseries. Why did I pick it? Because I was thinking to myself, hey, we haven't done anything from National Geographic in a little while. So yeah, hopped into that. Originally we were looking at doing another potential episode this week, but other people aren't going to be able to join me, so slotted this in instead. For those that don't know, this is basically a National Geographic series where Will Smith is kind of traveling the world and seeing kind of some of the mysteries of the world. Originally released on December 8th, 2021. 6 episodes in the first season. Who knows if it will come back for a second. Those episodes have a runtime of between 36 and 44 minutes, with this episode, I believe, being the longest one. In the National Geographic Disney Plus timeline of things, we had Secrets of the Whales and Growing Up Animal came out earlier in 2021, April and August respectively. And we had Welcome to Earth here in December of 2021. And then we haven't had any significant National Geographic series released since, but they do have a TBA series potentially slated here for 2022 of America the Beautiful, A Real Bug's Life, Limitless with Chris Hemsworth, and Shipwreck Hunters Australia. So shout out to the upcoming slate of National Geographic stuff on Disney Plus. The director of this particular episode is Nat Sharman, who has directed a variety of documentaries dating back to 2004, including a series called One Strange Rock, with a lot of the same team behind it as is behind Welcome to Earth here. Notably, among that team, one of the things that I caught there was Darren Aronofsky is an executive producer on the series, also directs one of the other episodes, I believe, or at least directs segments or a segment from one of the other episodes. Aronofsky, of course, probably best known for his directorial work on projects like The Wrestler and Black Swan. No writers quoted, but like there's definitely a lot of like straight to camera stuff that feels scripted, but no writers to speak of. And of course we have starring Will Smith here, who has previously done of course projects like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Independence Day, Men in Black, Wild Wild West, I Am Legend, the Bad Boys series, the live action Aladdin, and most recently King Richard, which he is nominated for an Oscar for. The lone piece of trivia I have for this series, surprisingly IMDb did not have a ton on it, is that the title of the documentary is taken from Will Smith's famous quote from Independence Day, "Welcome to Earth," which he says to an unconscious alien. So yeah, just diving into this, like I said, I watched the first episode, and I had a really good time with it. I went into this expecting basically a similar kind of vibe to The World According to Jeff Goldblum, which I've watched a few episodes of, okay, this is a celebrity that's kind of being taken on this journey. Or I guess it was like a mix of that and the Gordon Ramsay Uncharted series, which we've done a That D Plus show on. And in the Gordon Ramsay series, like, he's out there with a mission of, I want to experience food and learn how these different cultures and these different like parts of the world kind of master cooking, because that's his life. So I was very curious, like what the Will Smith component of this was going to be, or if it was just going to be like, hey, this is a series that we could have done with anybody, and Will Smith signed on to it. and it's probably still an element of that, but I did appreciate kind of Will Smith being so game and so along for the ride on this. It kind of opens with an introduction of him basically admitting he's not really an outdoorsy kind of person. He's never like slept outside. He's been in a cave once, I think he says. Um, and to basically like cut from that to him climbing a volcano and basically exploring volcanoes and stuff. I was like, oh yeah, he's okay. He's really doing it. Um, this episode kind of is all themed around the ideas, the silent roar, and it's themed around the ideas of infrasound and the sound that the world is making that we may not always be perceiving. Um, so in particular, as they're climbing this volcano, they touch on the idea that like the loudest sound ever recorded was a volcanic eruption, and this volcano that they're visiting, Mount Yasur in the South Pacific, um, like doesn't really make significantly audible sound when it's just constantly going. It's lauded as one of the most active volcanoes in the world, but it's not the loudest. But it's just constantly there and rumbling and the silent roar. And I think the coolest component of this for me was the reveal that Will Smith's kind of like explorer guide for this episode, Eric Weinmeyer, is a blind explorer, blind mountaineer. He talks about he went blind basically like right before high school, and he struggled with that, but he's kind of come out on the other side. And as they're climbing the mountain, like he's so much more in tune with the sounds that the world is making that he'll kind of like reference something that Will Smith, relying on sight, isn't hearing yet or isn't kind of experiencing. So I thought their dynamic was really cool, and there's a little fun bit at the beginning of the episode where they kind of realize, oh, Eric is 2 days older than Will Smith. They're both recording this as they're 51 years old, and yeah, just a very very close in age there. We bounce around to other non Will Smith centric segments. Will Smith is really only in the Mount Yasur portion of this episode, but we do hop over to the Mid-Atlantic where we meet Diva Amon, who is a marine biologist out there swimming. I don't remember what she called it, but it's basically like diving without a tank, so you can only go down as far and as long as you can hold a single breath. But in doing that, there isn't extraneous noise. You're not kind of experiencing the bubbles of an oxygen tank or kind of like the breathing apparatus that you would have. So it's a more pure kind of like sensation she has. She's out there studying sperm whales, and specifically like there's the sperm whale clicks, which are here lauded as the loudest creatures on Earth, because their clicks can go for miles underwater, which they use for echolocation and stuff like that. And they kind of like celebrate and exclaim like this feeling of like the clicks being so big and powerful when they're right up close to these sperm whales, that they feel the reverberation through their bodies, in addition to just hearing the chainsaw like clicks that they talk about. So that was a cool little segment. Then we pop back over to Mount Yasur, where we're introduced to Jeffrey Johnson, who is a volcanologist, one who studies volcanoes, of course. And they're going to basically descend into the volcano to leave some kind of like equipment down there, that can monitor the audio levels of what's going on in the volcano. And Will Smith has this like little aside to the camera, or direct cut to the camera that's clearly filmed after the fact. He talks about like it's like some kind of joke, the beginning of a joke. A rapper, a blind man, and a volcanologist go into a volcano, and he says that, and I love Will Smith, global superstar that he is, still identifying himself as a rapper first and foremost. I just thought that was a fun little, fun little thing. Then we cut over to San Juan de la Vega for kind of this little cutaway to this annual festival that happens there in I believe that was Mexico. And I don't know what the idea or premise behind the festival is. They don't really get into it, but they show off that the kind of central conceit of this is there are effectively like low grade landmines or like just explosive powder packets kind of scattered around this field, and it's just people hitting those with sledgehammers and like explosions of powder and stuff happening. And they film it in like super slow mo. And so like when you see the explosions, you also see the like reverberations of the air like just before the explosion of the powder kind of thing. So you see the sound waves, and that's kind of the thing they're really stressing here is that sound is movement. It is a force through the air, and that's why you can feel, deep sounds in your body and stuff, because it is pressure being pushed against you. It's not just the audio nature that we see, which brings us back to Yasur, where they're rappelling down into the mountain, and they experience this idea of infrasound, and Eric in particular, as kind of blind, who is more honed in on his auditory senses, is effectively hearing it like constantly. Will Smith taps into it a little bit here and there, and the volcanologist, once they've got the equipment set up, basically shows like what you're hearing is infrasound. It is sound below the lowest of bass levels that we can't typically perceive auditorially. And so their equipment is basically converting that into like the equipment was basically like almost a subwoofer, kind of like the thudding of a the speaker, and so you see it kind of personified in that, in a a cool way. We hop over to Sweden for a bit and see some ice skaters skating on the ice, kind of talking about how the ice, if you're listening closely, you can hear the quality of the ice, and you can identify how close is this ice to cracking if you get really good at it and stuff like that. If it's likely to crack, how thick is the ice? And they kind of show a lot of like visual, like people smashing down ice skates on the ice, and like the camera being positioned under the ice and looking up and seeing the cracks, and this episode definitely does a lot with the audio design of the episode. They really kind of ramp up the sound effects I think you're hearing for most of it. Then we hop back over to we hop to Italy for the Dolomites, where a group of spelunkers head down into a cave to identify. Basically, they're traveling down into the world to experience a place with no sound. And I'm like, I've seen like videos and kind of segments before of like super soundproof rooms where like if you are sitting in this room, it is so soundproof that the internal sounds that you make, your breathing, your heartbeat, will be so heightened and accentuated that the idea is basically like you will go insane if you just try and sit in that room for an hour or something like that, because of the impact that sound has in an otherwise soundproof room. And so as they're talking about like, we're going into this place where there's no sound, I'm like, well, how are they going to get away from the sound of their own heartbeats and the sound of their own breathing? And like right on cue, they're like how do you get away from, or how do you hear a sound that is quieter than your own breathing and then your own heartbeat? You get out of the way. And they basically leave their equipment there, which then in my mind is like, well, the equipment is going to be making a sound as well, like the recording equipment, but whatever. but they effectively get down like 1,500 feet below surface and kind of leave some stuff there, and then the series basically like presumably like lets us hear the audio that gets recorded, and it's effectively described as the creaking of the moon pulling the mountains just like the moon pulls the tides. And they basically describe this phenomenon as earth tide, and it's this idea that like it's happening because of the gravitational force of the moon. We just don't sense it on any kind of level at any kind of speed or anything because of, you know, the day-to-day life and noise and all that stuff. Then they kind of go into the idea that like even New York City raises and lowers 14 inches a day because of this earth tide, which is certainly a you know, something I would never have thought about. And then we wrap up with Will Smith back at Mount Yasur, visiting like a local kind of tribal village of kind of the, you know, the local indigenous people there, and they kind of talk about how they view the eruptions of Mount Yasur, you know, some miles away, and they kind of talk about how they view those eruptions and the infrasound and the sound of the volcano as the volcano's song, and they demonstrate this kind of like dance and ritual and celebration that they have that involves a lot of like stomping of the feet to symbolize that infrasound, and the clapping of their hands to illustrate the eruptions themselves. And like basically the episode ends with Will Smith getting really into it and dancing with all of them, and it's just a you know, a joyful kind of exploration of this idea of infrasound. Obviously, like we've known for many years of like infrared light and stuff like that. So it's certainly the first time I've thought of or been introduced to the concept of infrasound as well. The sound that is so low it can only be felt. And so yeah, it was a cool little episode, cool little series. And I don't know, you know, I there's so much in the world that I don't know if I'll go back and check out the other episodes in here and the other kind of topics he's going to delve into. But it was cool to see like Will Smith get like super excited about this, you know, as and shout out to the Disney Plus extras seem to basically be his like, you know, his own vlogs of of kind of this adventure. So yeah, I had a really good time with Welcome to Earth. It was a cool little idea, cool little concept. And yeah, shout out to that. I give it, you know, I give it an A, grading on the like National Geographic scale of things. There's a lot of cool ideas that's being explored. It's incredibly beautifully shot, and for an episode like this, I think they do a really good job of kind of enhancing the sound of everything in a way that really draws your focus to it, because that's clearly the focus of what they're aiming for on this episode. So yeah, gets an A from me. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. We've done this before. We don't often do National Geographic on here, and so when we do, I try and kind of not only give you like, here are the things that Disney Plus recommends, but if you're like me and don't have any clue what like any of those things would mean, I've pulled kind of some descriptions here. So the first one out the gate is One Strange Rock, which I mentioned earlier. It is a one-season series from filmmaker Darren Aronofsky, producer Jane Root, and host Will Smith, which is, again, pretty much like all the same names behind this project. One Strange Rock reveals the magical twists of fate that have allowed life to thrive only on Earth. This is a story told by the only people to have left it behind, astronauts. We have Out There with Jack Randall, which is another one-seasoner. Take a walk on the wild side with zoologist Jack Randall as he searches for exotic, endangered, and iconic species in some of the most unforgiving environments on the planet. Jack treks deep into the Australian outback on a mission to research deadly crocodiles, unpredictable pythons, endangered green turtles, venomous snakes, and wild kangaroos. Gordon Ramsay Uncharted has run for 3 seasons. You can find more of our thoughts on that on That D Plus Show episode 56, where Logan and I sat down and watched that. But if you missed that, Gordon Ramsay is on a mission to immerse himself in new cultures, dishes, and flavors. From Peru, Laos, and Morocco to Hawaii, Alaska, and New Zealand, Ramsay roars through valleys, dives into oceans, hikes through forests, and climbs mountains as he travels the globe in his never-ending pursuit of culinary inspiration, as I kind of mentioned earlier. Running Wild with Bear Grylls is out there for 2 seasons. World-renowned survivalist Bear Grylls ventures into the wild with some of Hollywood's most beloved celebrities. I like the first episode on that was like Brie Larson. I was like, oh, that's a interesting, cool little idea. Shark Beach with Chris Hemsworth. I think this is the only one on here that's not a series, but as I did mention, they're going to be doing a series with him coming up in the coming months. But this is just a standalone, like 45-minute documentary where Chris Hemsworth is on a mission as he uncovers the science of shark behavior to discover how humans and the ocean's top predator can safely coexist. Lost Cities with Albert Lynn is 1 season, although there are like also spin-offs that are like, Lost Cities, The Lost Treasures or something like that with Albert Lynn. But Lost Cities combines high-tech archaeology, breathtaking visuals, and genuine exploration to make headline-grabbing discoveries portrayed through our host, Albert Lynn. Our ambitious approach applies 3D scanning to some of the most extraordinary sites of antiquity. This series delivers powerful, emotional stories with high-tech imagery to bring the mysteries of the past vividly to life. Life Below Zero has come up before. This was one of the recommendations back when we did the Gordon Ramsay episode. Back then, it was 14 seasons. Now it is up to 17. And the premise of this is deep in Alaska, the primal way lives on. Fight the freeze, brave the wild, hold on to your sanity, and winter is no wonderland when temperatures plummet far below zero. The series follows the drama and hardships experienced by Alaskan households in different corners of this merciless territory as they battle to survive, thrive, and live life on their own terms. And then lastly, The World According to Jeff Goldblum, which has now got 2 seasons. Originally, it only had that first season that basically launched alongside Disney+. Jeff Goldblum pulls on the thread of a deceptively familiar object to unravel a world of astonishing connections and fascinating science and history. Basically, Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum, diving into weird random one-off topics each episode. I think I've watched the episodes on like ice cream and shoe collecting and maybe even tattoos. Yeah, Jeff Goldblum being Jeff Goldblum. So shout out to all those series. Again, we don't dive too much into the National Geographic side of Disney Plus here on this show, but it's usually a treat when we do. Just kind of like a nice step back from the wider world of action movies and entertainment and all that stuff. Extracurriculars. Are we watching anything else on Disney Plus? I don't think I watched anything else on Disney Plus recently. But yeah, we're looking ahead. Tentatively, the slate of upcoming episodes. I'm gonna try and start doing this a little bit more. So if you want to watch along in advance, you can do that, because that seems to make way more sense for the premise of this show. So upcoming next week, I think we're gonna try and do Jungle Cruise. That was the one we were gonna attempt to look at this week, but did not. Timing couldn't work out, and people's schedules and stuff. So tentatively, we're gonna try for Jungle Cruise next week. What is that? So it'll be the March 11th episode will be Jungle Cruise, the Rock Dwayne Johnson movie. March 18th will be the part 3 of Behind the Attraction, the kind of docu-series on Disney rides and attractions and stuff like that, to coincide with an upcoming Disney trip that I will be making. Basically, like the last, I think each of the last few times I've done Disney, it was like, okay, I'm gonna use that as a standalone solo episode. So that's going to be coming up here on March 18th. March 25th, we are going to probably look at West Side Story, which just came to Disney Plus this week. The Steven Spielberg adaptation of the musical. And then kicking off April 1st, we will, of course, be doing the first episode of Moon Knight that will have come out there at the end of March 30th. So stay tuned for all of that in the weeks to come. And that is going to do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me as I, took this trip down Welcome to Earth. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter, and I will give a shout out to our usual shows. That Nerdy Site Show is our Monday podcast. That News You Care About, our Wednesday podcast. Our current Saturday limited run series, That Bond Show. You can go catch new episodes there. Strictly on YouTube. That one is not on podcast services because that's only going to be running for a few months here. But you can go check that out over on YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. And then also while you're on YouTube, you can find our Let's Plays that go live every Tuesday and Thursday, as well as our bonus Let's Plays currently that are Friday Night Dying Light, hosted by Cameron Abbott as he plays through Dying Light 2. You follow all of us and all of that over at That Nerdy Site as well, or go to thatnerdysite.com. Once again, thank you for joining me. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.